In the late 19th century, the Russian Empire stood as one of the great powers of Europe. It controlled Finland, Ukraine, and much of Poland and wielded enormous influence across the continent. To its south stood the Ottoman Empire, a shadow of its former glory. 3 centuries earlier, the idea that Russia would eclipse the Ottomans would have seemed impossible. In the mid-16th century, the Ottoman Empire dominated Eastern Europe and threatened even Vienna itself, while Russia was little more than the Duchy of Moscow. Yet both states shared one thing in common. They both believed they had a divine mission to expand their borders and to spread their faith. That conviction guaranteed conflict, and the result was one of the fiercest rivalries in European history, stretching across 4 centuries and fought in a dozen wars. The rivalry began with the Khanate of Astrakhan, a region lying north of the Caspian Sea. Astrakhan was vital because it controlled the mouth of the Volga River, a crucial artery of trade. In 1556, Ivan the Terrible launched an invasion and seized Astrakhan for Moscow. Once in control, he shut down the slave markets that had long supplied the Ottoman Empire. This was an intolerable provocation. The Ottomans dispatched a force to retake the city, but their campaign ended in disaster. The Russian army crushed them, and Astrakhan was secured for Moscow. The Ottomans, however, did not remain passive. With their allies, the Crimean Khanate, they struck back. The following year, they invaded Russia, burned Moscow to the ground, and massacred hundreds of thousands. The rivalry was born in blood and devastation. Almost a century later, the next clash erupted. This time, the struggle centered on the Cossack lands of modern Ukraine. The east of the region was controlled by Moscow, while the west fell under the authority of the Ottomans. The division fostered deep resentment among the local population, who hated to see their homeland split between rival powers. In 1676, Russian forces marched south and captured the capital city of Chigurin. 2 years later, the Ottomans struck back, retaking the city. The war ended in stalemate, with both powers bloodied, but neither achieving lasting success. Yet this conflict was soon overshadowed by an even greater struggle. In 1683, the Ottomans laid siege to Vienna. The threat galvanized numerous Christian nations to unite against the Muslim power. What followed was the Great Turkish War, a conflict that would roll back Ottoman control across Europe. The Ottomans were pushed back on multiple fronts. Chigurin was lost once again, and in the north, Russia attempted to capture Crimea, though those attempts failed. Undeterred Tsar Peter the Great turned his sights on the fortress of Azov. For generations, Russian rulers had dreamed of gaining a warm water port on the Black Sea. After a brutal naval bombardment, the Ottoman garrison surrendered and Russia claimed Azov. The war ended in 1699 with a crushing Ottoman defeat at the Battle of Zenta against the Austrian army. The Ottomans were forced to cede significant territory to the Habsburgs and recognize Russian control of Azov. But this triumph for Moscow would prove temporary. As soon as peace was signed, Russia found itself in conflict with Sweden in the Great Northern War. In 1708, Swedish King Charles V invaded Russia, but his campaign ended in catastrophe, and his army was annihilated. Charles escaped into Ottoman-held Moldavia. Russia demanded his extradition, but the Sultan refused. Infuriated, Peter the Great marched south, but his army found itself surrounded by an Ottoman force 5 times its size. Facing annihilation, Peter was forced to sign the Treaty of Pruth, surrendering Azov back to the Ottomans. For the Russian ruler, it was a humiliating reversal. Though he vowed to retake Azov, he would die before realizing that ambition. His successors kept the dream alive. In 1735, Russia marched once again with 60,000 troops into Ottoman lands. They seized Azov and parts of Crimea, but plague ravaged the army and halted the invasion. Neither side could secure a decisive breakthrough, and the Treaty of Nisa was signed. This time, Russia kept Azov permanently. The Ottomans would never regain it. As the 18th century progressed, the Ottoman Empire began to show clear signs of decline. While Western Europe surged ahead through the Enlightenment and Industrial Revolution, the Ottoman state grew stagnant and corrupt. Reform-minded sultans tried to modernize, but were resisted by the entrenched power of Islamic scholars and the elite Janissary corps. At the same time, another neighbor faltered. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth collapsed into weakness and became a Russian vassal. Resentment among the Poles exploded in 1768 when nobles launched a rebellion to restore independence. The revolt failed and the rebels fled into Ottoman territory. Russian-backed forces pursued them across the border and committed atrocities against Ottoman civilians. Outraged, the Sultan arrested the Russian ambassador. War was declared. Russian armies poured into Moldavia, while in the Aegean Sea, Russian warships clashed with the Ottoman fleet at the Battle of Chesma. The Russians unleashed fireships and destroyed more than 20 Ottoman vessels, killing 10,000 men. With defeat mounting, the Ottomans sued for peace. The Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca gave Russia greater influence in the Balkans and recognized Crimea as an independent state. The humiliation was profound. 9 years later, in 1783, Russia broke the treaty, annexed Crimea outright, and the Ottomans were powerless to stop it. Another war followed, but again the Ottomans were beaten. Russia captured Moldavian cities. Austria joined the fray, taking Serbia, and an uprising in Greece stretched Ottoman resources thin. At the Treaty of Jassy in 1792, the Ottomans formally recognized Crimea as part of Russia. By this point, the balance of power was unmistakable. Russia had proven itself militarily superior. For the Ottomans, the only hope lay in exploiting moments of Russian weakness. One such chance came after Napoleon shattered the Russian army at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805. Sultan Selim III moved against pro-Russian governors in Wallachia and Moldavia. Russian armies responded with another invasion, and again Ottoman forces could not withstand them. Recognizing his empire's weakness, Selim attempted reforms to modernize the army, but his efforts provoked fierce resistance. The Janissaries revolted, slaughtered civilians in Constantinople, and assassinated the Sultan himself. His brother took the throne, but on the battlefield, Russian armies kept advancing. At the Danube River in Slobozia, the Russians executed a cunning trap. They feigned retreat, lured the Ottomans across the river, then turned back and surrounded half the Ottoman army. Bombarded by artillery and plagued by hunger and disease, the trapped forces endured 6 weeks of misery before surrendering with 36,000 casualties. Yet despite victory, Russia gained little in negotiations because Napoleon soon threatened an invasion of Russia itself. The Ottomans had survived for the moment, but their hold over their Balkan subjects weakened steadily. In 1821, Greece rose in rebellion. The Ottomans initially crushed the uprising and retook most of the land, but then the great powers intervened. Britain, France, and Russia all came to the aid of the Greeks. At the Battle of Navarino, the combined fleets destroyed the Ottoman navy, leaving Constantinople exposed. Russian armies advanced deeper into Ottoman territory than ever before, capturing Adrianople, just 200 miles from the capital. Faced with disaster, the Ottomans surrendered. Russia gained new territory in the Balkans, and Greece secured its independence. From this point, the Ottoman Empire was regarded as the sick man of Europe, a declining state kept alive more by the rivalries of the great powers than by its own strength. The debate over what to do with the Ottoman lands became known as the Eastern Question. France sought influence, and in the 1850s, Napoleon III pressured the Sultan into naming him protector of Christians within the empire, a title Russia had long claimed. Tsar Nicholas I would not accept this insult and invaded Moldavia. Britain and France, alarmed at the prospect of Russian dominance, and perhaps even the fall of Constantinople, issued an ultimatum. Russia refused to withdraw, so Britain and France declared war siding with the Ottomans. The conflict became the Crimean War. Allied troops landed on the Crimean Peninsula, defeated Russia at Alma, and laid siege to Sevastopol. After nearly a year, the fortress city fell. Russia sued for peace. The new Tsar Alexander II abandoned Russia's claim to protect Christians in the Ottoman Empire and returned conquered lands. Ironically, though, the Ottomans were on the winning side. They were forced to concede authority over many Balkan states further, weakening their empire. By the 1870s, Ottoman control in the Balkans was crumbling. In 1875, the people of Herzegovina rebelled, soon joined by Serbia, Bulgaria, and Montenegro. Ottoman troops responded with brutal massacres of civilians, shocking Europe. The great powers convened the Constantinople Conference and demanded reforms, but the Sultan refused. In 1877, Russia declared war once again. Hundreds of thousands of Russian troops surged through Romania and pressed southward. Britain, alarmed at the possibility that Russia might seize Constantinople, sent its navy to block them. Forced to halt, Russia agreed to talks at San Stefano. The Ottoman Empire was stripped of nearly all its Balkan holdings. Montenegro, Serbia, and Romania won independence, and a new Bulgarian state was born. The centuries-long rivalry had reached its climax. By now, both empires were shadows of their former selves. Their final confrontation would come during the First World War. Russia and the Ottomans once again found themselves on opposite